I'm Digital DeWald, and this is Half the Law in 30 minutes or less, defending against California anti-SLAPP suits. Today, how to dismantle legal censorship with motions, not panic. Let's begin. Good afternoon, everyone. Today's lecture focuses on California's anti-SLAPP statute and advanced defense strategies for attorneys. As you know, SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. These lawsuits attempt to silence critics by burdening them with legal costs. California's anti-SLAPP law provides a powerful shield, but wielding it effectively requires sophisticated strategies. Let's dive in. 1. Foundations of California's anti-SLAPP law. California's anti-SLAPP statute is found in Code of Civil Procedure, Section 425.16. The legislature enacted this law to address a disturbing increase in lawsuits brought primarily to chill the valid exercise of constitutional rights. The statute has a critical mandate. It shall be construed broadly. This isn't just aspirational language. Courts must interpret the statute expansively to protect speech and petitioning activities. The statute creates a special motion to strike with a two-step analytical framework. Prong 1. The defendant must show the plaintiff's claim arises from protected speech or petitioning activities on a public issue. Prong 2. If successful, the burden shifts to the plaintiff to demonstrate a probability of prevailing on their claim. A key feature is the automatic discovery stay upon filing the motion, which is typically filed within 60 days of service of the complaint, though courts have discretion to permit later filings. 2. Novel approaches to establishing protected activity. A. The arising from analysis. A critical determination is whether the plaintiff's claim truly arises from protected activity, or if such activity is merely incidental. The California Supreme Court has clarified that the defendant's conduct forming the principal thrust or gravamen of the claim must itself be protected speech or petitioning. Courts increasingly scrutinize attempts to characterize ordinary business disputes as arising from protected activity merely because speech was involved. The focus is on the specific wrongful act complained of. For example, a claim about non-payment is based on the unprotected act of not paying, not the potentially protected activity of using an idea in a film. When defending, deconstruct the plaintiff's narrative to reveal that despite artful pleading, the true basis of the claim is indeed protected activity. B. Evolving interpretations of public issue. For conduct to be protected under Section 425.16 E3 and E4, it must connect to a public issue or issue of public interest. Recent case law has evolved this concept in several domains. 1. Online speech and artistic creation statements on public social media platforms are increasingly recognized as occurring in a public forum. In Daniel V. Wayans, an actor's Twitter account with over 1 million followers was deemed a public forum. The process of artistic creation itself, including off-camera discussions and promotional activities, has been recognized as protected activity. 2. Commercial speech. The anti-SLAPP statute's application to commercial speech is complex due to the exemption in Section 425.17c and the framework from Filman.com Inc. v. Double Verify Inc. Commercial speech must genuinely contribute to public debate to be protected, not merely reference a topic of public interest. 3. Official or quasi-official context. In Briggs v. Echo, the California Supreme Court held that for statements made in official proceedings or in connection with issues under official review, defendants don't need to separately demonstrate the statement concerned a public issue. The official context itself provides the necessary public interest connection. This protection extends to quasi-official contexts. For instance, mandatory SEC filings constitute protected activity, both as documents placing issues under SEC consideration and as communications about matters of public interest. See Mixed Conduct Claims post-Burrell v. Schnitt clarified that an anti-SLAPP motion can strike specific allegations of protected activity, even if they're part of a broader cause of action including unprotected activity. This allows a surgical approach to parse complaints and strike only the protected speech elements. 3. Strategies for defeating the probability of prevailing. Once you've established protected activity, the plaintiff must show a probability of prevailing. Here are key defense strategies. A. The Sweetwater Evidentiary Standard in Sweetwater Union High School Distat v. Gilbane Building Company. The court held that evidence relied upon by plaintiffs must be admissible at trial or have a reasonable possibility of becoming admissible. This is not a license for speculative evidence. Defense counsel should scrutinize the plaintiff's evidence for defects like hearsay, lack of foundation, or speculation. Challenge how the proffered evidence could reasonably become admissible by trial. The automatic discovery stay forces plaintiffs to oppose the motion with pre-litigation evidence. Vigorously oppose attempts to lift this stay, arguing that plaintiffs should have sufficient evidence before filing lawsuits implicating First Amendment activities. B. Affirmative defenses as shields. Even if a plaintiff presents a prima facie case, you can still prevail by establishing an affirmative defense. 1. Litigation privilege. Civil Code Section 47B. This provides absolute immunity for communications in any legislative, judicial, or other official proceeding. It's exceptionally broad and applies even if the conduct was allegedly unlawful, as illustrated in MMM Holdings, Inc. v. Reich, where use of allegedly improperly obtained documents was deemed protected. 2. Common interest privilege. Civil Code Section 47C. This qualified privilege protects communications made without malice to interested persons. It's valuable in business settings, employment contexts, or among organization members sharing legitimate interests. 3. No error Pennington Doctrine. This doctrine provides First Amendment immunity for good faith petitioning of government bodies, including threats of litigation, unless they're a sham. The sham exception is narrow, applying only when petitioning is objectively baseless and subjectively intended as pretext. 4. Other statutory immunities. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act provides broad immunity to interactive computer service providers from liability for third-party content. For public employees, Government Code Section 820.2 immunizes discretionary acts. C. Attacking the merits. Beyond affirmative defenses, directly attack the plaintiff's prima facie case. The minimal merit standard requires admissible evidence on every essential element. A complete failure of proof on even one element means the plaintiff cannot demonstrate a probability of prevailing. For claims requiring proof of falsity, present compelling evidence of truth. For claims requiring subjective states of mind or complex damages, highlight the plaintiff's evidentiary weak points due to the discovery stay. 4. Advanced procedural strategies. Strategic timing. While anti-SLAPP motions are typically filed within 60 days, courts have discretion to consider later motions upon showing good cause. An amended complaint may restart this clock, particularly if it introduces new SLAPP-triggering allegations. B. Coordination with other motions. An anti-SLAPP motion offers superior advantages to a demurrer when protected activity is implicated due to the discovery stay, potential attorney's fees, and immediate appeal rights. Filing the anti-SLAPP motion first is generally advisable to secure these benefits. C. Federal court considerations. In the Ninth Circuit, California's anti-SLAPP statute applies to state law claims in federal court, unlike in some other circuits where it's considered procedural and displaced by federal rules. This can influence removal decisions if diversity jurisdiction exists. 5. Attorney's fees strategies. A prevailing defendant is entitled to reasonable attorney's fees, typically calculated using the lodestar method. Track all time spent on anti-SLAPP analysis from the earliest stages. Even with partial success, a defendant is generally considered a prevailing party if they derived a practical benefit from the motion. This can include narrowing the lawsuit's scope, limiting discovery, or reducing potential damages. To counter claims that your motion was frivolous, ensure it has at least an arguable basis in fact and law for each prong. Document pre-filing research thoroughly. 6. The slapback, CCP Section 425.18. A slapback is a subsequent lawsuit, typically for malicious prosecution, filed by a defendant who defeated an earlier SLAPP suit. Under Section 425.18c, if an anti-SLAPP motion targets a slapback, the mandatory attorney's fees and immediate appeal provisions don't apply. Conclusion: emerging trends. California's anti-SLAPP statute continues to evolve. Key trends include judicial refinement of public interest, particularly in commercial disputes, application to new contexts like online platforms and social media, increased evidentiary rigor post-Sweetwater, uncertainty in federal courts due to circuit splits. ongoing debates about potential overuse and reform. Effective defense requires understanding the legislative purpose, evolving case law, and strategic procedural mechanisms. By embracing novel arguments and a proactive defense posture, you can protect constitutional rights and deter the chilling of public participation. Thank you for your attention. Leave your questions in the comments below. Slap suits aren't about justice, they're about intimidation. But now you've got a blueprint to fight back. File early. Argue hard, win faster. If this helped you, share it. Someone out there needs this playbook. I'm Digital Dewald. Until then, let the law be your megaphone, not your muzzle.